Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Mitch Rap Pod. Oh, no Limits, the Thriller Podcast. How you doing this week, Mike?
Chris, I've been better. I'll tell you what, though, my friends, Mr. Ludin and Mr. Ricola, are making a lot of money this week as I am down for the count with COVID, round 2 of COVID. So
Ooh,
I'm going to need you to carry me through on this one here tonight.
yeah, I got you. Yeah, call me back when you hit three. Then we're even.
I know you got the experience with this thing.
Luckily, I haven't. Maybe three's the charm. Like I haven't had a whiff, or I guess you can't get it if you don't test for it. So
You haven't tasted or smelled anything in 3 straight years.
yeah, pretty much. So I'm just getting by. But my kids, on the other hand, anyways, that's another podcast.
Yeah.
But today, we have the privilege to bring to you a Don Bentley book. We wanted to take the opportunity to welcome in, read some of we already read one of his books from his own series. And, we just came off Kyle's last book. Thought it'd be a nice, little ease our way in, get ready for next year. We're already anticipating next year's book. So, boom, wanted to read one of his Jack Ryan Jr. series.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. And we're bringing this to you on the Thriller podcast, even though a lot of our recent episodes, 3 back-to-back episodes, covering Code Red on the Mitch Rap podcast. So if you haven't heard our coverage over there, go ahead and listen to our 3-part series on Code Red, which Chris, is a #1 New York Times bestseller.
I know.
So glad for Kyle to go out on a bang and on a high when we saw that news.
Yeah, that was awesome when I saw that. And did you see he posted a picture with Sherry's shirt?
Sherry, our patron, our special agent, we call her, our special operator, made shirts. She's sending them out to a bunch of us that says, "I'm Code Red." And Kyle was wearing it on his picture, announcing New York Times #1 bestseller. I love it. It's amazing, this community.
Yeah, it's great. So I don't know, Mike. Tell me what did you think of Jack Ryan Jr.? Is this your first? Have you read any Tom Clancy? I guess maybe that's where we should start. Tom Clancy as a whole and our foray into that.
We should, yeah. I'm a bit of a novice. I will be honest. I have read a few years ago in high school. I know Hunt for Red October. I definitely did. I was kind of a junkie back then for all this military history stuff. I think I tried at least 1 or 2 more back in the day. But no, in my adult life, I have not interacted with the Clancyverse. Maybe this is part of my dirty laundry here, but I played Rainbow Six as a kid, a couple other of the Clancy video games. I love them. I have not watched any movies, TV show, or
Seriously.
anything. Yeah, so, besides Hunt for Red October, but like the modern stuff, like what was it, the Amazon series? I didn't see any of that. And is that Jack Ryan or Jack Ryan Jr.? I
No,
can't keep it
it's
straight.
it's like it's a reimagining of, I mean, it's Jack Ryan, but it's like, a full reset of the universe. Yeah. So, I'm not a Tom Clancy expert. I have dipped my toe in a little bit more than you. I've read Hunk for Red October, Patriot Games. I got this for Christmas a couple years ago, mainly because I liked the series so much on Amazon, the first season at least. And then, of course, I love the movies. I've seen Some of All Fears, Hunter for Red October, both
Oh,
the
okay.
Harrison.
Some of All Fears I've seen. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then you haven't seen Patriot Games or
I
what's
think that's one that I started reading again.
Clear
I
and
was like a
Clear and
kid.
Present Danger with
It was
both of the
either
Harrison Ford ones.
it was one of those that I tried to read. I've seen clips of Clear and Present Danger, never actually sat and watched it. So outside of Hunt for Red October and Some of All Fears, dude, I'm a beginner here. So you got to carry between my COVID. I'm sucking down cough drops over here, and my limited knowledge of the Clancyverse. I'm gonna need you to carry things a little bit tonight.
Yeah, sure. So, and of course, we should mention that there was that awful reboot of the movies with Chris Pine, Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit. No one liked that one. So we'll just forget it. Won't recommend that one.
And then we covered Without Remorse, but it And John Clark is in here. That was really
John Clark is
exciting.
in here.
So
Yes.
one thing I want to say going into this is I'd imagine if I was more of a Clancy fan, I would love some of the Easter eggs that Don Bentley is giving us. I no doubt trust that he nailed the appearances by so many people and name drops of so many people. John Clark was obviously one I recognized, and it was really cool that he got to be like a mentor for Jack Ryan Jr. here, and he didn't want to let him down. So I like those conversations of how all these folks of an older generation are weighing on Jack Ryan, right? The expectations of living up to who they were and what they've done. So I really, really like how that's written. I believe if I was a bigger fan, it would have landed on a much higher level than it did for me.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We always talk about, or at least I always wonder what fans feel like when they jump into, let's say, a Brad Thor series, 20 books in. What if you jumped into the Code Red series? We can make some sort of best guesses for how they would react, what they would be missing, what they wouldn't be missing. But ultimately we know all the knowledge. So like our bias is biased, right? But here, this is my first time, because most of the time when we do these series, we jump in with book one and we go along, right? I think the only like I read the Terminal List, but then I jumped to In the Blood. But I guess because I had already read the Terminal List, like I didn't really miss much besides like the whole Freddy stuff, which is a big thing. But anyways, but here, like literally, I'm jumping in. I like know who Jack Ryan is. Like I didn't. I guess I had surmised that he had become the president from like I don't know, talking to people, talking around
Right.
maybe because I know Costello Brian is a big Tom Clancy guy. I remember talking to him about like how Jack Ryan is now the president.
And we had Stephen Hendricks on when we did Without
Right.
Remorse. That was fun.
Yes. And I know about this whole. I guess from watching the show that he's this analyst turned operator. He has a friend, John C. Clark, who is, he's not the analyst. He is the operator, and then there's this sort of dueling past where like there's been books only about Jack, books only about John, and then they're often in each other's books, right?
Yeah.
So this is like the universe that Clancy has made. And so here we obviously have Don's first look into the Jack Ryan Jr. series. This is the ninth Jack Ryan Jr. installment, but it's the first time that Don took on this. And so it's interesting. I was looking to see who started this, and it was actually Mark Greaney in conjunction with Tom Clancy. So like I guess he stopped his last book that he wrote by himself was in 2003, and they took some time off, and then it was like wasn't until 2010 where he started teaming up with Greaney and some other authors to write some of his novels, ultimately until he passed away, I believe, in like 2014. And then after that, all of the titles got, it was continued on. It was Mark Greaney for a while with the regular Jack Ryan series. I believe Mark Carson is the current writer of that series.
Mark Cameron.
Mark Cameron, yeah. And then we obviously have different authors that have taken on the Jack Ryan Jr. series, with Don, I think, being the third author in that series.
This is a big thing. Like this is a big enterprise. Hearing all that, it's a bit wider. I think the net is a lot wider than I thought it was at first. And I'm thinking 2010, Mark Greaney had just written The Gray Man, 2009. So Clancy himself must have really seen something in Greaney very, very quickly, right? Or did Greaney have other writings before that? I don't know.
I think it's got to be off of the success of The Gray Man,
Really?
that he was then tapped to like sort of be his ultimate successor, right? To write these novels together. And then ultimately, once he passed away, I haven't looked into, I don't know, Tom Clancy's history of like, was he sick for a long time? Like what we kind of know with Vince and that kind of stuff. So maybe he knew he was going, he needed to tap out, had all these stories in his mind. Interesting if we could find someone who's like a Tom Clancy historian to talk to him about that. Cause I mean, he looms so large in this genre, right? Especially with Vince, right? And he has a certain style. I remember like reading Hunt for Red October. It's very similar. Like if you wanted to just sit down and read some like Le Carre, like, or even like I went back and I read the first the Ludlum books, the first three Bourne books.
It's
because
tough.
they're written very differently. They're good, but it's not like the summer, what we call summer beach read thrillers that we
No,
get every summer now.
I almost think of it as pre-Flynnian in the sense, and I know the time overlap for like a decade plus, but pre-Flynnian in the sense that he modernized these things, kind of knowing, you know, how the future was going to shorten our attention spans, or maybe it was just what he preferred, how crisp and how short and how concise he made some of his early books compared to those names you just mentioned, your Ludlum, Le Carre, Clancy. It's almost like he ushered in this new guard, which, for good or for bad, it changed the way these books were written. It changed the audience. And to me, that's good because it made it much more accessible. But there is a little something lost in the craft when you go back and read the original Clancy, Ludlum, Le Carre, and all the other millions of authors we're missing, Frederick Forsyth and everybody. Is there a little bit of craft lost now that we're kind of pop fictionizing these things? Like Don Bentley's Jack Ryan Jr. book is, I guess it's the Clancyverse in name and characters. In many other regards, though, it wasn't similar to what I knew or had remembered about my dabbling in early Clancy books. It just felt, he did a great job, but just felt different. Is it almost like you think the name and the label is being used, but it's not necessarily trying to recapture what made a Clancy book a Clancy book?
I think yes and no. I was thinking about this because while I was reading, I couldn't help but think of Born Robert Ludlum's Born Identity, and I don't know if it just has to do with like the story and about how you have this guy who is over in a foreign country, and I mean obviously it's very different circumstances, but he's just placed in from back to back to back situations where he has to like come out of it, and the writing style. And then I kept on comparing it to the other Don Bentley book we read, Without Sanction.
It's
And
so short.
they're completely different writing styles.
Yeah.
And also this one was quite long. Like, you know, I could feel some parts of it where I felt like things weren't necessary. And maybe that's because we've been reading all these, you know, we're reading Brad, we're reading Kyle, and then they're just shortening their books, and it's very quick, concise, to the point.
Yeah.
And here, like I found myself like picking out chapters that I was like, yeah, we could have got rid of that chapter and it would, you know, it wouldn't really mattered.
Yeah.
But did you pick up on the big difference in writing style between these two?
No, big time. Yeah, and it's almost a double-edged sword because it just shows his breadth, like that Don Bentley has so many talents and so much skill. He took over from a Clancy and slotted into that universe. He created his own niche with Matt Drake, and that first Matt Drake book was just staggeringly different than anything we've read. It was that first person, that flip-flopping back and forth.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool style, but that's not at all here. This one felt like a typical thriller I'm used to,
Right.
with Clancy characters, a little bit of that long-form storytelling, but I would say nowhere near some of the older stuff. But yeah, it felt so different than Matt Drake. So the really good part is his versatility, which means he could take over for something as big as a Flynn and Mills rap verse, right? He knows how to do that. He can modernize it, though, give it his own spin. We know with the things he did with Matt Drake. So I think it's just he's a master of all trades here. And the double-edged sword of that is, how do you choose where to go, right? Like with all those different skill sets, what voices, what pressures do you have to listen to? If you can do all these things, how do you decide the path you're going to take and stick to it? Like that's going to be a tough thing to do.
Yeah, and I think I also couldn't help but think that this novel read more like a earlier Flynn novel. You know, like some of the ones where, you know, we had a lot of storylines going. We're jumping back and forth.
The jumping back and forth, big time.
We're getting a little more information about everything going on.
Yeah.
As opposed to like just, I guess, following this up immediately after Code Red was a big juxtaposition. And then also, again, going back to Without Sanction, again, was another big juxtaposition. So,
well, think Deadfall too. We stayed with Harvath and Deadfall. We stayed with Rap and Code Red. And here we're jumping storylines like it's separation of power, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, ultimately, I think we end up spending most time with Jack Ryan Jr., but
We do.
we're hopping around to Darien, right? This Irani American agent. It reminds me of like a Grisha type character.
Mm,
We
does
spend
he?
some time with, well, like a Grisha wannabe, this
Okay.
idea, not like,
I think of him like a oh, who was that early Vince? He was he was Palestinian, I want to say. He
oh,
launched the
oh,
rockets. He and Ben Friedman had a
David
beef. David was his
Gabrielle
name. Yeah, Jabril.
Jabril. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
His
went
real
by
real name
David.
was,
Damien reminded me of that guy.
yeah, no, that's very good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with that. And then you have, I don't know, I think the ending of this book was rock solid. Like the fighter pilot when she sacrifices her life,
Oh,
and like the
dude.
entire couple, I didn't want to move away from those chapters. Like I kind of was getting pissed off. We were jumping back to Jack Ryan Jr.,
Yes,
but like that whole scene was very touching. Like I almost
it
like
was.
cried, even though like I know it's
Yes.
fake, it's fiction. I was just like, shit, that was pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And that's where we were getting some of these like technical things that I think like these Clancy novels are known for, but the rest of the novel didn't really have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm used to reading these things and getting a crazy description of a gun or a,
Sub.
like, yeah, whatever.
It was like that with the airplanes, though, with that
Yeah, with
maneuver, that pit
airplanes.
maneuver.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that was very cool. And that was screaming Clancy to me.
Yeah.
And it had me on the edge of my seat. Like I wanted to know what was going to happen.
Same.
And then I could care less. I got really confused at the end with what was going on at this Syrian house. Like
Agreed.
going from I guess we're jumping ahead to the end,
The
but like,
Overwatch from Kerry while he's in the building.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's where jumping back and forth, I feel like, that's why I brought it up, because
It hurt it.
I think that one of the good things about moving away from that style and sort of like limiting when you do that has made these Kyle Brad's novels better.
It's
You
made them
know,
better.
yeah. Sometimes I want more, but I don't necessarily want more other. I just want more Scott,
I
more
think
Mitt.
I think you have to choose when to do it too, right? Because Kyle and Brad are doing that in their 22nd book in a series that, they know so well. Where Don, it's his first one in the Clancyverse with these characters, maybe knowing when to do it, when to pull back, because that fighter jet scene, honestly, it's the winner of the book. It has to be. It's like
It has to be.
one of the
It
most
has to
compelling
be.
things. But here's the problem with it. It comes out of the blue.
It
Like
does.
we had no earlier scenes to, oh, there's this pilot fighter squadron training with the Israeli forces, and we're kind of maneuvering and showcasing our skills together in these fighter jets. And then in the back of our mind, we're like, okay, that was interesting. I wonder where that's going. Then when that chick pops up in the moment, like, oh, that was that group we saw, 10, 15 chapters ago.
You needed like just one chapter introducing
You had to
her
mention her.
early
Yeah,
on.
exactly.
And then it hits because like, oh, then the missiles go off, and then we cut back to her,
Yeah.
and then we're primed. Instead, it's like, where the hell are we going?
Who
At first, I
who
was
are
like reading
you?
this chapter, I was like, Jesus, we're in the heat of the battle in Syria, and you're literally going to jump to this fight, like this, this, give me a 20-page backstory on, not 20 pages, but couple paragraph backstory on this random character that we are just now meeting.
Which we love though, right? Like we love the character, love the backstory. I almost wanted her to be the main character of the novel instead of trying to, rip Jack Ryan's name out of the sky and just slap it on here. Like it just shows Don can create those kinds of characters and stories. It was just knowing where to place it and when. Because while I'm reading this awesome action scene, I'm just asking myself, who is she and where did she come from?
Right.
This fight over Tel Aviv. Wait, and then I was like, and this was my fault. I understand. I was under the weather trying to listen to this thing, and it was partially my fault. A lot of this is my fault because I was kind of rushing through it. I probably wasn't the best attentive reader I could have been. But then I'm like, wait, so I was with you when we went into Lebanon. And then he got knocked out, taken to Syria. And meanwhile, there's something with the Iranians. This guy's an Iranian American. They're doing something. And then there's something about the Wagner group randomly brought up. And then I'm like, the Russians or whatever. And I honestly, it's right at probably like that 2/3 mark, 3/4, 2/3 mark. I just lost it. I was like, I can't keep track of none of this. And the good news is, so I was tracking the story the first third with Captain America, and I want to talk about that family, Becca and son. I love, 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 love everything set up early about Jack Ryan and the boy and his bond, his childhood friend. It meant so much to me. It was very, very great storytelling, great depth to the characters. Then the second we have like one other gripe. I hate to go negative here, and partially this is my fault. I know I wasn't the best reader. I was going through this book pretty quickly. It seemed a coincidence that he was first in the action where the woman first got attacked, and then again he kind of saves her on the beach, another attacker, and I realized that was all masterminded because the guy at the CIA who sent him, and he was supposed to be looking out for this. What was he assessing? An asset to see if he passed the test.
Asset validation, yeah.
Asset validation, which was really a sideshow to kind of distract the Shin Bet. And I get that. It just seems so coincidental he ran into and saved this woman twice. So I was like, what's going on here? But then the second that all wrapped up, I was lost for the middle part of this book. I couldn't keep track of who was where. The jumping around was a little too much. But then that final action scene lasted a little long, but it was incredible. Like
it lasted very long.
It lasted just a tad too long, where I couldn't keep track of, is he in the complex? Is he out of the complex? Is he riding in the desert, standing on top of some Humvee thing with a hammer or whatever, going nuts? Like it's really cool shit. But it was so long. He jumps
out, right? He uses an antenna to like swing his way onto the Humvee, like the other Humvee, and then like jump in and then like kick the one chick and then yeah.
It was baller, but you got that going on while the missiles are fired at Tel Aviv and she's trying to knock this airplane out of the air, and I'm like, we've been talking.
And there's also like 10 suicide.
Yeah,
truck drivers. Right. Did they even get stopped? I honestly like forgot about them.
I completely missed what even happened to them because it's like brain overload. I feel like when that kid loses Captain America, my brain was like going. Good.
I'm not the only one who thought that like the ending was just like crazy.
Is too much of a good thing, which it almost felt Mark Graney in a sense because Gray Man is almost too much of a good thing.
It's very Gray Man-esque, right? You know,
with him, with all these injuries, at one point he's recapping everything he went through. Oh my God, getting crucified. We got to talk about this too.
He got crucified.
So I don't remember how he got out of that because too much was going on. Oh well, I guess the snipers were there. I don't know why the snipers were there. I got carried away with the suicide bombers showing up out of nowhere. There is a mention of Wagner Group. Am I crazy? Because then I'm like, the fucking Russians are involved here. And are we in Iran? Are we in Lebanon? Are we in Syria? I don't know. I got really lost, but then there were some amazing, really cool action scenes. I don't know how to put all that together in my mind.
No. I think that ultimately is what, I really enjoyed the book. Is it the best book I've read? No. Would I recommend it? Sure. You're gonna have a fun ride with it.
You will, yeah.
I think like ultimately it's like its lows are that had a little too much, led to some confusion. Yeah, like you said, why are the snipers there? Well, like we set up earlier in the book
with Carrie,
this idea that there was this Carrie and his partner, right? Who was he looked the part, and they sent him in like to look at this. To look at this.
He's Libyan, by the way.
Right, that was not Syrian. Yeah,
that was funny.
Like, the dialogue, though, I think was good. Don does really good dialogue.
It was great.
I liked the way he wrote some of the dialogue that Junior had as well. Yeah, so like it was just maybe too long of a gap between setting up. You perfectly set up why those commandos would be there, but then you had a lot in the middle.
Yeah.
Before we ever came back to them, and then I completely forgot. And then I remember now, but like in the moment, it's bad when I have to like go back a couple of chapters or like if I had a book, reflip back in the book and like, oh, that's that guy. Okay,
exactly.
That's not the best. The other thing you're saying is like Wagner Group, Iranians. Yeah, like you did not. Although I think she was a cool character, you did not need to throw in like Damien's love interest, who happens to work for the Wagner Group,
who was then a waitress.
and she was the waitress. He's the reason why he got like kidnapped. You know, one of the I thought what was freaking awesome was when he gets right after what's her name? What's the wife? Not the wife. What is the mother's name?
Becca, I think.
Becca. Yeah. Right after
Yeah.
Becca and the kid get captured, he like teams up with that Shin Bet officer. What was his name?
Oh, yeah, Duda, but his partner
Duda.
Tal. I love Tal
Yeah.
earlier
Well, and
on.
like, right. There's so much that goes on. The
I
second
forgot about that
2/3 of the
stuff.
book, you forget about his interactions with Tao, which I thought were great.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah, like you're setting up, you're thinking that like, oh, this is a budding love interest that's gonna like go on
Yes.
for books and books and books,
They had
and then
chemistry.
boom, they did. And I
And on
thought
the streets
Don,
of Israel. It was like a cool setting. He's moving around. You're getting great flavor of the territory, a great relationship between those two characters. The Becca, Tommy, Captain America stuff, the Shin Bet, the offices of Shin Bet, one was hidden, one was more in your face. There were some really, really cool things going on early that unfortunately I forgot even happened.
yeah, and then you move to the middle part where he's teaming up with Duda, right?
Yeah.
He
Yeah. Yeah.
he actually inserts with the other with this commando force, and
Right.
that was some crazy action. Like they land on this empty soccer field, they go in, it's a trap.
Yep.
He's got to, like all that stuff is cool, but then Duda goes out and then he goes by himself. Like I think it ultimately comes down to just a little too much.
Too much of a good thing. Yeah.
Sometimes leads, to some negative consequences, and I think that's ultimately why, you know, it had some issues.
Had
So
some
I won't
flaws.
say they're not like huge, but they just, that's what we're here for, is to give our critique. So
Yeah. And I think the silver lining and the good thing here is each of those individually is done so well. If they were each like a short story or just an independent action scene, they're so damn good. Now you take the framework and plotting of a Kyle Mills book and you take the characters and drama of a Vince Flynn book and you mold all that together and let Don write some of these scenes and dialogue. It almost is like a match made in heaven
yeah, no, I think it will be.
without the pressure of it having to be this Clancy monster big 2,000 page book that goes into tech specs and details. It's almost like Vince Flynn boils, like if you take this book and boil off all of the things that we thought were extra or too much, you're pretty much left with a Flynn Mills book. And the fact that we could say that about something written by Don Bentley means he was the perfect choice for this.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better. Couldn't have said it better. I think the worst part of the novel is the fact that he was there for not one, but two assassinations attempts against Becca. Like that.
That's what I'm saying. That coincidence. Yeah.
I gotta call it a spade. You like to say, I gotta call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
The first one I could believe that maybe
Right.
the Chinese would want to move in,
Oh, you got the Chinese here too, stealing secrets and
even
yeah.
though like wouldn't the Chinese have known that the Shin Bet and the CIA are like also in the vicinity of this lady? That's some pretty bad reconnaissance if they're just gonna try this assassination attempt.
And Damien, like all these cooks in the kitchen.
But not one, but then he just happens to go to the hotel when the same assassin is trying to
Yup.
cross the beach to get this
On the
thing.
beach. Yeah. A lot of coincidence.
That was the worst part. Everything else
Agreed.
I can deal with, but like that was just like, sometimes coincidences are just too much.
Again, too much. It's too much.
Too much of a good thing.
The
How you want to get on the
beacon.
scorecard?
Okay, before we do, Gavin and his Eye of Sauron, and then
Oh,
also the Americans having the beacon in Captain America. I think it was a Ding who told him that. Or was that John Clark? I don't remember, but just so cool.
yeah.
Some cool tech stuff.
That was no, the Shin Bet are the ones who put the beacon in there.
Oh, okay,
And so
right.
Jack Ryan Jr. was unbeknownstly trying to get this beacon back to the kid every single time.
No,
Not
the
knowing.
Americans did it.
No.
We needed the Israelis to use like a higher emitting signal or something to track it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's right. But Jack Ryan Jr. didn't know it was his like that Peter guy who
It was Peter, right?
That
That's
was
who it was.
that
It
was a
Peter.
cool chapter where
An
you're
old friend
reading
of
it.
Ding.
Yes, you're reading it, And the way Don writes it, it's like this, I don't know. It's like the gray man, right? Remember that scene where he goes to that passport guy and
Yes.
you think he's going to be his ally,
Yes.
but then
Laszlo.
in
He
turn
traps
calls
him.
traps him.
Yeah.
Like the way Don's writing that makes you feel like, oh, this is a trap. Like he's gonna
Right.
ultimately, it doesn't happen. But I really enjoyed that scene because I felt this tension.
Yeah, I felt the tension, but it was amazing when Jack Ryan Jr. thinks back to what Ding said about Peter. And he said,
Yes.
like, trust him
Oh,
with your life. Or, he's one of us. And that
he's
little
like me.
nugget,
He's like,
he,
it's as
trust
if
him
like
like
you
you
or
would
me.
trust me. And the
Exactly.
second Jack Ryan Jr. could remember that memory from Ding, we trust Peter the whole way. When at
Right.
first I thought he was going to pull a gun on him or
Yeah.
something.
Same.
I really did.
Especially because like Jack is noting that, oh, why is Peter here? Why is he the only one here? This is
Yeah.
weird. Like I don't know. I really enjoyed the way Don wrote that.
Now think of that, right? How Don is able to pick up and use these old-timey characters and pull on these relationships. Now insert Irene Kennedy, Thomas Stansfield, Stan Hurley. And can you imagine Don getting to do that the way he does with Ding and even John Clark? And now imagine, just saying, Don Bentley being given the chance to do that with a younger Thomas Stansfield.
That would be really cool.
Bro, dude.
That'd be really cool. So you brought up Gavin.
Yes.
I think this lends credence that Don. Hopefully, Don brings back Marcus because he
Gavin was
wrote.
like Marcus. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. He wrote
The
a
video
great character
games.
like that. Yeah. It was
Yep.
awesome. It gave me hope that we can, release Marcus, please.
I'll be honest here. Part of us covering these books is less for me to rate them on the scorecard and see how much I enjoy them, and more for me to pull out how much better I feel about Don Bentley taking over the Mitrap series. So if our scorecard today is a little lacking, I am giving a perfect 50 out of 50. I'm giving an A plus 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 to how well this book makes me think we're in good hands with Don for Mitrap. Like, forget that we have these quibbles and these issues with how this particular book hit for us. It doesn't even matter because I'm reading this book just thinking with one thing in mind. How good can Don Bentley make the Mitrap series? And everything I want to see in both the Matt Drake book that we read so far and in this one is just pointing in the direction of it's perfect. It's perfect. We're in good hands. So might not have liked all aspects of this book, but it absolutely did what I would hope it would do in terms of Mitrap.
Yeah, ultimately, I think that's why we chose to read these is because we were
Exactly.
curious. And, I was a little bit not suspect after reading his Matt Drake series, but just like, oh, this is different. This will be really interesting to see what he does with a Kyle Mills with a Vince Lynn book.
Yeah.
But now after reading this,
We're fine.
I'm 100% sold.
100%.
100% sold.
Agreed. Let's do it then. Let's get into the scorecard. I mean, Chris, action. I don't know. Can you beat this? This is pretty good.
It's got a lot of action.
It does.
It's got a lot of action.
I think I'm going 10 only
You're going
because
10?
I'm about to get a little low soon. So I'm going to call out the positives, and
All right,
action
there you
was
go. There you
an
go.
absolute positive.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I think, starting out with the multiple, what is it, the triple nine or what's the triple N's? What's the like we didn't call the SEALs, we called these special Green Beret
Their unit.
their unit. I forget what they were called.
I forget the name of it too, but dude, in that case, Don is also he's got the chops to really cover all things military, from units
Yeah.
to specialties to weapons to tactics to flying. Like, he's got it all. He can write.
I thought
any
that's
of
where
those.
he really, in the military element, he really sung.
Yeah.
Like, we got that description of that mortar gun, like that's on the back of the flatbed tow truck. Like that,
He knows
that was
the lay of the
cool.
land. Yeah.
And even like bringing in the military history,
Yeah,
of, like,
absolutely.
the Battle of the Bulge or the Battle of Britain, right?
Yes, that was cool.
And we even, I guess said Derelovich just happened, but just like that pilot talking about Flight 93 and like, Don
Right.
is able to bring up all of these things. And I hadn't known that. I had known that some F-14s were scrambled that day, but I that prompted me to go read about those two pilots, and they didn't have enough time to load
Mm,
missiles onto their planes. So, but they didn't care. They knew that the other three, because
they
Flight
were going to take
93
it down.
was delayed by 40 minutes from takeoff, and the pilots delayed their take. So like everything had already happened. And so they knew that there was this last plane. So these two pilots, without being told, hopped into their plane unarmed, knowing that they were going to take down Flight 93 by ramming into it. Luckily, not luckily, but like they didn't have to sacrifice their life because the people on the, obviously people
On
know
board.
people on
Yeah.
board sacrifice their lives. But I had no idea about that. And I love, you know, Kyle, everyone, Howdy,
Jack Carr.
Brad, Carr, when they put these little tidbits of history in it, and like it pulls on something, at least in my brain it does, and I hope it does in other readers too, where it's like, oh, I didn't know that, I want to go look that up on Wikipedia. Or oh, obviously we read Fred Burton, but like when Don drops that,
Yes.
like that makes you want to go buy that book and read it. That was awesome.
How many
And he,
times
he
did he
drops
do
a
that?
Vince Flynn,
We got Vince Flynn, we
the
got Fred
latest
Bird.
Gray Man novel.
Dude, it's all in here. And even Chris Albanese is training him
Oh
on
yeah,
shooting.
I remember I texted you and you never
Yes.
texted me back, but I was like, dude, Chris Albanese, and you were like, what?
What?
What's going on? You hadn't gotten there yet, and I
Yeah.
was like, dude, just wait.
It was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
I'll meet you with the 10 because I
All
agree
right.
that it's gonna drop. So let's give him some props where he's got props. It's a lot of action and most of it is really good.
And almost all of it's really good. Now, where the action falls in terms of the plotting and the pacing and being necessary, I'm not really sure. I think if you isolate the parts of protecting Becca and Tommy, and here's the thing: why was the spray on stealth paint, stealth in a bottle, or spray on stealth as I call it? Why was that not mentioned ever again? It's like I thought that was one of the cooler things that she's building this tech, a spray can that can, make something stealth. Like, can consumers put that on a drone and then have a stealth drone? Like, what are the applications of this spray on stealth? And then it's not mentioned again. So, like, everyone wants Becca the whole book, but we're never really told again why or the implications of what she knows. I would have liked that to be explored a little bit more. So that's just one of those plotting things that got lost in the sauce. So it's cool, but then it doesn't get followed up on. Happens a bunch with other things in the plot. Who is the villain? Is Damien, is he operating? And then all these other people brought into it. There's different angles over. Is she working with the Chinese? Did she sell out to them? That was proposed at one point. Jack Ryan didn't think so, but why bring it up then if nobody actually thinks that's legit? That's not even a possibility. That wasn't explored. I got to go to a 5. Sorry, Chris.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I do.
Oh man. Yeah. Ultimately, it was just parts of it were just very confusing, and like I said, there was too much time spent between like some needle drops and then like where we picked up those needle drops later on that caused me to like completely forget a storyline. And it's not like I read this book over the course of weeks. I'm reading this book over the course of like 3
3 days for me.
days.
Yeah.
So like for me to forget something that quickly, or not remember, and it's not because of lack of concentration or trying, it's just because there was so much to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't go as low as a 5. I think I'll go like a 7, 6.5, 7. It's low. It's definitely lower on the, and maybe because here the sense that like the plot, too much of a plot is definitely a negative.
Yeah.
Maybe too much action is not a negative, but like too much of the plot was just. I think you could this book could have really used a little bit more editing and or removal. The Wagner group didn't need to be there. The Chinese didn't need to be there. Like the,
Yeah.
getting rid of like the zealots of like this, even just the attack, like right.
Is it the suicide bombers? Is it the missiles headed to Tel Aviv? Is it? And then wasn't there a gas at one point? Like spray nozzles on one of the missiles? I thought it was going to be a gas attack.
It was the missiles would spray the chemical reagent on top of the television.
Oh, that's why they were going so slow. And not to come back to it, but the Becca thing again, because of everything you just mentioned getting in the way, we never actually saw her in captivity. So it's
No,
like
yeah, yeah.
not one scene. And then at the end when they're like, I wasn't hurt. They didn't torture us. We were fine. Like, bro, we just said this kid is going to have a meltdown if he doesn't have a Captain America figure. But now he's watching his mom being like taken and harassed and kept in isolation. Like, what were their conditions like? Even a few cutbacks to that along the way would have tied it back in for me. But we got nothing. We were just, and maybe she's a deep plant, right? Maybe Don's got us 2-3 books from now. She was a
Could
plant.
be.
She was
Could
passing
be.
on secrets, and then they just let her back unharmed without touching a hair on her head. So it could be fools, I'm the fool, shame on me. But it didn't work in this book, just having so much 70% of it where she's just not present, yet the whole novel is Jack Ryan wanting to save her. I still don't know why, because there's some spray that she made that we still don't know anything about.
But
I'm
he only
stuck
wants to
on it. I'm
save
sorry.
her. He only wants to save her because he originally is trying to save her. He doesn't even know that she's a scientist. He's saving her because she has
Peter
this
tells
kid.
him that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
and I like that.
eventually Peter tells him that. So honestly, you could have just had this story be about Jack Ryan trying to save the girl.
Agreed. Absolutely. It spiraled into something so big that it didn't need to be.
You don't need the attack. Like you can have Darian be there as this evil henchman who's trying to kidnap her, and like that's what you're trying to deal with, and he's the big bad. But bringing in the cult, bringing in this attack, having him get literally crucified. What did you think about that?
All right. I thought it would be
I mean,
really cool if it was a
cool.
different context.
It was amazing. It was like really a good idea. Like,
Yeah.
just this novel didn't need any more of those ideas.
That's one of those you put on a index card and you put in the desk drawer for book number 3. You like, let me save this little one right here and build up to it down the road. I didn't think it's almost like squirrel, great idea, and you just start putting it in there. One other thing, because this is going to come to buy-in, I had remembered that Jack Ryan becomes president, but I didn't know the timeline. So again, I'm going to take ownership. This could be on me. So I would trust your score, Chris, a lot more than my score on some of these things. But I didn't realize that he was the president concurrently with the book. Like, Jack Ryan Jr. is operating while his father is still president. And there's no communication or real mention of that, except for the heat of the battle when the terrorists want to know who he is and what his last name is. Now let's bring it up. But it's not really something we've been dealing with the whole time. One of those times where it just felt, we're slapping the Clancy name on this. This is the Ryan family just because it's got to be the Ryan family, when this might have been a better book, in my opinion, again, not knowing anything. Take those names off it. Don't even include the whole president, who's my father thing. And just have Jack Ryan be, Joe Schmo, someone else. To me, that might have made it better, but I'm sure there are other people out there who loved, knowing all these dynamics of the Clancyverse. And for me, just his father as president thing, I knew was a thing, but this book didn't feel like it was the right place for that to be a thing.
Well, I just think that that's probably what makes this series kind of interesting in general, is this idea that the president could have his oldest son be an operator, like a clandestine operator. Like, that's, especially in today's day and age when social media exists, like these people's lives are. So it's kind of hard for me to think, especially when the guy says Jack Ryan, the leader of the Quds Force, like, I don't even think Don like mentions that he realizes that, oh, I have something bigger than what I thought I had.
Right. But isn't that why they want to crucify him, though? Like, that's how we get to the crucifixion thing.
No, I literally just think they want to crucify him because he's an American asset and they have his actual name, and they're just going to plaster that name on there. Not that they now have. I think if they knew they had the president's son, they would have done a lot more than just that.
Well, I agree, but that's my whole point of, like, if you're going to have that because you have to have it, because that's the universe you were hired in which to do that, double down on it, right? Like that has to carry more weight. That has to be addressed. It has to be a driving force of characters' motivations. So there was a little hesitancy of him like to share his last name with people, but it just came off as a gimmick. Earlier on of like, I'm Jack, not gonna tell you what my last name is. And then this one guy being like, I demand your last name, tell it to me now. It just came off as gimmicky. Whereas like, we didn't need that. So if you do have to deal with that, deal with it more directly than just, it was just shallow, I felt. So anyway, all that is my roundabout way of saying for me, the buy-in is, because the action had me bought in, I'm going to go 2. 2.5, 2.5 because the action, 2.5 because the action.
Fair enough. I was going to go 2.5 as well. I'm dinging it mainly because of the coincidences.
Yeah,
early on, this idea that he gets played, he's kind of a fool, doesn't even know like what he's being, set up into. But yeah, no, I think like 2.5 is fair.
Because I feel like I gave it an extra half there because I was prepared to go with 2. On the bad guys, I'm going to ding it here a little more. I was definitely going to go 2. I'm going to cut it down to 1.5 just because.
Wow.
Who's Damien? I don't care. Who's this woman he's with? I don't care. Who is this guy who captured him and wants to crucify him? I don't really care. Who are these suicide bombers who are randomly in the middle of nowhere filing out of a house going into these cars? Also don't care. I almost didn't care about any villains. I didn't know who the villain was. We cut to this Damien for God knows why. I think it was a good backstory. Again, if I cared, it probably would have been a good backstory. But nothing about the motivations of the bad guys, even the Chinese stealing secrets. Who? I want to see a discussion in the Chinese Communist Party of who wants this woman scientist and more about the spray. Tell me more about the damn stealth spray, okay? The bad guys didn't mention it once. So I don't know. 1.5.
Wow. I thought the Derry character was interesting. And early on, he's set up to be like the big, driving force opposite Jack Ryan Jr.
Right.
This idea that he's like the perfect Iranian spy because, he has all of his mom's American features,
right,
but he has all of his, the hatred of Jews in the West of his father. So much so when he goes into that one place, they literally don't want to let him in because they think he's an American, not their asset that's going to be dropping off information. Yeah, because we set up the beginning of the novel, he's getting access to the Iron Dome from that unsuspecting Israeli like IT guy, right? Remember,
that's right.
Like the guy gives him like there's so much stuff I keep forgetting.
The Iron Dome stuff was cool throughout the book.
Yeah,
start to finish. Yeah, that was cool. A little random in the beginning when the Iron Dome fails with the test, and again, it just happens to be next to Jack Ryan Jr. and blow up like a building he was standing next to. Like
right. Coincidence.
But it set up the Iron Dome, which had some payoff later.
Yes. A lot of these novels that have coincidences. So I'm going to go to it. I'm going to go 2.5 again.
2.5. Okay. We're going to make up some ground here. I'm going to make up some ground with the good guys. This tends to be what happens.
I really like the good guys.
Same. Unfortunately, because I don't know the backstory, Jack Ryan Jr., I liked a little bit. He's talking about his family and his mom, and I was like, okay, well, that.
No, I'm not. I'm like sort of even putting like Jack Ryan Jr. as a character is cool.
I'm saying he would bring me down a little bit from a 5. Is what I'm saying.
So you're not going to give him 5 because of his.
I honestly would give the 5 to
Tal,
Duda,
the little kid, Duda,
Becca, the airplane pilot, the woman at the end. I would give a 5 to like almost all of these other characters, but something about me not getting enough here to really understand who Jack Ryan Jr. is, why he's doing what he's doing, his relationship with the president, which seemed to be mentioned and then kind of ignored. And again, I said this 3 or 4 times. This is on me. All you Clancyverse people yelling at me right now. You're right. You are right. But just me trying to jump into the series. And if this was my first touch point to get into it, a little tough. So I'm going to go 4. Still a pretty good score. I'm making up a little ground here.
I'm going to go 5 because of all the secondary characters I enjoyed. And I thought he was a compelling enough character to make me want to read more of these novels. So
true. Okay.
What about the setting?
setting.
Israeli. We spent a lot of time in Israel, and I think like as well as some time in Lebanon and Syria. I felt like I was there. I it
Yeah.
really did. I thought that Don does a good job of, even like with when we switch over and we're with some of the military people, you get the sense of like actually, where they are on this compound, what the compound looks like. Yes, I'm gonna go for. I think it was a solid setting description.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I liked everything that we got. It got jumbled up in the middle. Is it Lebanon? Is it Syria? Is it where? Who? What? But all the times we were in Israel, in the cities, in Tel Aviv, and on the streets, the sights, the sounds, it was all there. So all really cool. We just got a little lost with that facility that he was in when they were taken, and then he was separated from Becca. And where did they go? But then you have the really cool scene of all the crucifixions just in a field.
Right.
There was some really cool writing there. So yeah, 4 out of 5 on setting.
You want to do free space or cover?
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, we'll finish. We'll save cover for left. We should switch this up and put cover as our
Yeah.
last thing.
Yeah.
So we kind of already said our winners. My winner definitely would be one of my winners would be the airplane pilot. I thought that scene was very emotional. Hit it pretty hard. If I had to pick another, it would be, the story that he tells about he stood up for someone, or was
His
it
friend.
him, or like he stood up for his friend, and
Growing
like his
up.
father says, sometimes good men
Yeah.
have to. I would, you're the quote guy. I feel like I wish you had the actual quote.
I haven't had a lot of quotes. I wish I had some more, but guess what? This one I had to write down because it's
Good,
perfect.
good.
A good man has to pay the price for doing what's right.
Yeah, perfect.
A good man sometimes has to pay the price for doing what's right. Yeah. There's your winner right there. Jack Ryan's advice.
So those would be my two. And any other ones you got?
I was going to give both of those. You took my primary, you took the backup, and they're so good that I'm just going to let that stand. You nailed
No,
them both.
that's it. It clearly is what it is. It covers it. That leads us to the covers, man.
So there's the very clear lineup of covers for all the Don Bentley, Jack Ryan Jr. novels, which are kind of cool. It's usually an object.
They're actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's like a spec.
It's like a spec object broken down with a
Yeah.
blueprint in the background, almost like that architect board. I really, really like that series of covers. I think it's kind of cool. The yellow and the green, great color scheme. Having, what is that, an Uzi, I'm guessing?
It's an
'Cause we're in
Uzi,
Israel?
because we're in Israel. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of teched out with all the different dimensions of it. I really like that as a lineup of covers, and this one really hits. It's probably my favorite of the three. What would you say?
Yeah. No, definitely. And then, so if we compare it to the other two, is this, I'm guessing UK? It seems like a very UK, the middle one.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. That must be UK, and the last one is Dutch. It's the Dutch cover.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the beach of Tel Aviv, which,
right.
All right, they get a point. They got the right city.
For sure.
In the middle one, we have the Jewish star. We have a knife, which knives come into play quite a bit.
A lot of knife fights. Yep.
I don't know why we're in is that the catacombs, or is that just a street?
No, I think that's just a street, and it looks very Israeli, or it really looks like
Jerusalem.
the Levant.
Yeah.
So I give both of those, actually all three, because there is that discussion about the Uzi in the book as well. I give all three very high marks on judging the cover by the book. There's nothing out of place.
There's nothing out of place. I mean, I don't love like a standing man, or like, what do you think of the command, like underneath the Tel Aviv beach, you got the commandos running, it's all right.
Cool. Yeah, it's all right.
But I mean, the cover authors did an amazing job, like actually putting relevant stuff. Like this is the first time there's not a single irrelevant thing on a cover. It's amazing.
Hats off. Unfortunately, the composition of B is trash.
Yeah, well, it's that UK style, man. They do that.
It's just composed so poorly. Like you got the three different scenes essentially, all with their three different color tones and palettes, in no way being tied together, that it doesn't really work. But the opposite is true of C. Everything is blending together.
Blends in. Yeah. C is kind of a cool cover.
The color palette's really neat. It definitely is a Dutch book. It's screaming Dutch to me. I don't know what it is. Maybe that gold on the fringes, but yeah, if B didn't exist, I'd go 5 out of 5, I think. I really would.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I'm going to go 4.5.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go high. I'm going to make up some ground here.
All right. All right. So what are our scores, Mike?
Let's total this up. 37.5 for me.
And I'm a 39.5.
I got to be honest, that's a little higher than I was initially thinking. So, although it sounded harsh.
When you were saying some of your scores, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be like a first 20 or 20s book.
I was a little scared it would be, but I'll be honest, the parts I liked, I had to give credit to. Like, I couldn't ignore the good stuff here. And I think that ultimately was reflected in the scorecard, though I too was a little nervous with my plot and buy-in and bad guy score, but the good guys, the setting, the cover, and the action saved it. Really did.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, we're satisfied. We're happy that Don is in our life now. Going to be yearly, at least for the next couple books. So look forward to that content. I don't know, Mike. Do you want to just keep this Don Bentley train going and go right to his second Matt Drake series?
I think we should. We've had some other things in the plan, but it does feel good to be back on the Thriller podcast. And we're going to be covering and talking with Don Bentley also on the Mitch Rapp podcast. So make sure you're subscribed to both of those feeds. We eventually do want to get back to the Scott Harvath podcast, but we want to give a little time here to Don Bentley and others. So I think you're right. Let's do it. What is book 2 in the Matt Drake series that we can cover next?
So the first one was
Without Sanction, and number 2, The Outside Man.
Man.
Let's do The Outside Man. It will be interesting flip-flopping as well, going from a Clancy Don book to an Outside Man Don book. And then hopefully maybe we'll talk to him soon, and maybe we could pull influences from both of these series to kind of get a sense of what we can expect to see brought into the Mitch Rapp universe, now that we've read one of each of his books.
Yeah, I think that'll be perfect. And it'll give us time because unfortunately we were trying to be listening to Moscow X, but the new David McCloskey novel, which came out today, the day we're recording, but the audiobook for that is not coming out until next month. So that means if we want to cover it sooner than next month, we actually got to read the book. And Mike and I are a little bit busy right now to be reading. So
a little bit.
We're going to delay that. We're definitely going to talk about it, but just full transparency. That's why we're pushing McCloskey back a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely do want to cover it because Damascus Station was one of my favorite books, I'll be honest, that I've read.
You said you reread it this summer?
In like 3 years. Not only did I reread it this summer, but for the first time ever, I suggested a book to my wife's book club. And so,
really,
yeah, I rarely do that, but I just felt something about this story and the characters. And there's this one relationship. I don't want to say much more, but the way it's developed, it was really, really cool, really intriguing. And the Syrian conflict, no thriller we've read has really gone into it that deeply. We've only kind of dealt with the consequences of it, where McCloskey throws us into the streets of Damascus, right during the heat of the insurrection rebellion. It's fantastic. So I think you should read that. If you do have time, I'd love to cover that here with you. But we're going to do Moscow X for sure, if not October, definitely before November. In November.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. Well, we need to thank our patrons, including our special operator Sherry F. Shout out to Sherry with her shirts, getting on that New York Times bestseller. Shout out by Kyle. Got to thank our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Awesome to chat to them, by the way. I don't think we've potted since we had our little group chat, like post Code Red team up. But
that was great.
Always great to talk to them. Please subscribe, rate, and review using Apple Podcasts. You can find us on thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just let Jack be Jack.